In the beginning, it was almost unnoticeable, so subtle that I barely acknowledged it. After many years of marriage, Mia and I had experienced our share of highs and lows, just like any other couple. Yet, this time felt different. There was a disconnection that I couldn't quite grasp. It was as if Mia had become a stranger, her warmth fading into a silence that filled our once lively home. Our conversations dwindled into one-sided exchanges, and the familiar sound of laughter had all but disappeared. Initially, I attributed it to stress. We had faced a challenging period after the fire that destroyed our old house, and moving into my grandmother's place wasn't exactly what Mia had envisioned as a fresh start. Still, I sensed that her distant behavior was about more than just the upheaval of our living situation. Little by little, small changes began to accumulate. Mia started coming home late from work, using meetings as an excuse, meetings that, upon reflection, seemed unlikely or non-existent. Her phone, which she used to leave casually on the kitchen counter, was now constantly in her hand, the screen deliberately angled away from my view. On top of that, she often forgot to wear her wedding ring, offering hurried explanations about being in a rush or it not fitting comfortably anymore. I tried to overlook these changes, convincing myself that relationships naturally go through phases and that we just needed to reconnect. However, it became increasingly clear that I was the only one making an effort. The breaking point was not a dramatic revelation, but rather an accumulation of everyday moments. One evening, I suggested we watch one of her favorite shows together, a ritual we used to follow religiously. She looked at me as if I had proposed solving a difficult equation, muttering, "No, I'm tired," without even glancing up from her phone. Later that night, I caught a glimpse of her chuckling at something on her screen, completely absorbed. That laughter wasn't triggered by a funny meme, it was the kind of genuine, spontaneous joy that comes when someone makes you feel truly alive. At that moment, I couldn't deny the truth any longer. There was someone else. I wrestled with my thoughts, questioning whether I was simply overanalyzing, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her altered style of dressing, the casual disregard for intimacy, and the unmistakable feeling of being emotionally abandoned, everything pointed in the same direction. It wasn't just about her being tired of our marriage, it was as if she had already moved on, either with someone new or seriously contemplating it. And that's where I ran into Sergeant Sweetie, the same officer who had arrested me the night of the crash. She looked different out of uniform, dressed casually in jeans and a simple top, a far cry from the stern, authoritative figure I had seen before. We talked for a while, and I learned she was single too. Her divorce had been rough, though not quite as dramatic as mine. One conversation led to another, and before I knew it, I was asking her out. To my surprise, she said yes. That first date was something else. I showed up in my best suit, probably a little too formal for the occasion, but she seemed to appreciate the effort. From the start, she made it clear that she wasn't interested in games or unnecessary drama, and honestly, neither was I. 9 months later, we were married, and I can honestly say these have been the best years of my life. She's not just my wife, she's my partner in every way that matters. Together, we built a life grounded in trust and mutual respect, two things that had been painfully absent in my past marriage. As for Mia, I've only heard snippets about her through mutual acquaintances. She remarried twice, and from what I gathered, her second husband has managed to keep her in check. Good for him, I suppose. I don't hold any resentment toward her anymore. It took time to reach that place, but I eventually realized that clinging to old anger would only keep me stuck in the past. These days, life is simple and fulfilling. My wife and I recently marked our 25th wedding anniversary with a river cruise through Europe, a trip she had always dreamed of. Our kids are grown, doing well, and I couldn't be prouder of them. Just last week, we gifted my grandmother's old house to our daughter as a wedding present. It felt like a full-circle moment. That house had been the backdrop to so much turmoil and change, yet now, it was starting a fresh chapter for her. Every now and then, I reflect on those chaotic years with Mia, not with regret, but with appreciation. Those experiences shaped me, teaching me resilience and showing me just how much I was capable of overcoming. Life doesn't always unfold the way you expect, but sometimes, the unexpected detours lead you exactly where you were meant to be. Yet, I hesitated to confront her directly. How does one broach a subject like infidelity? The idea of bluntly asking, "Are you cheating on me?" felt absurd. So, I chose to wait and observe, tracing patterns and looking for signs like the way she would suddenly remember plans or how her mood would shift when certain names were mentioned. It was clear she wasn't just pulling away, she had already left emotionally. Living with her felt like sharing space with a stranger. Reflecting on it now, I realized that a part of me had come to terms with it even then. Nia made it easier by treating me as if I were invisible, yet I still clung to a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, if I gave her space, she would find her way back. It was naive, but when you've built a life with someone, giving up doesn't come easily. To me, that was worth fighting for, no matter how foolish it seemed. The hardest part was not the suspicion but the relentless waiting for her to slip up, waiting for her to admit the truth, waiting for her to care enough to hide it. It felt as though every day was a step closer to the inevitable, and somewhere inside, I think she knew it too. That final evening appeared like any other. I returned home from work to a house cloaked in winter's early darkness, an unsettling stillness hanging in the air. Something felt wrong as soon as I pulled into the driveway. Nia's car was missing from the garage, and the porch light remained off. Normally, I wouldn't have thought much of it, but with the way things had been, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. Once inside, I called out for her, no reply. I wandered through the quiet house until I noticed a glow from the bedroom light upstairs. Climbing the steps, I found her at the dresser, meticulously applying makeup. This wasn't just a quick touch-up, she wasn't wearing her usual casual outfit of jeans and a sweater. Instead, she was in a sleek black dress, one I had never seen before, its hemline noticeably higher and the neckline revealing more than usual. Next to her, a pair of striking stilettos rested, the tallest I had ever seen her wear. I stood in the doorway, observing her unnoticed. She was so focused on applying vibrant red lipstick that she didn't register my presence at first. It dawned on me then, this was intentional. She wasn't just going out, she was preparing for someone. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to remain composed. Without raising my voice or expressing anger, I simply asked, "Are we going somewhere?" She hesitated briefly, meeting my gaze through the mirror without the slightest hint of guilt, just irritation. "No," she replied bluntly. "I'm going out. I have a date." She probably expected me to lose my temper, to shout or plead, but I remained still, processing her words. When she noticed my calmness, she pressed, "Did you hear me?" I said, "I have a date. I'm going out with another man." My pulse quickened, but I managed to keep my tone steady. "No," I responded. She turned to face me, clearly annoyed. "No what?" "You're not going out on a date," I said, my voice unwavering. "At least not while we're living under the same roof," I said, my voice firm but controlled. "If you're set on seeing someone else, go ahead. Just pack your things and find another place to stay. Once you're out, I'll take care of the divorce papers, and you'll be free to do whatever you want." She scoffed, a bitter, mocking laugh escaping her lips. "I'm not leaving," she declared. "I like this house, and when it's mine, I'll do whatever I want with it. Keep acting like an idiot, and I'll make sure I get most of the money when we sell it." I took a deep breath, trying to cling to the last shred of patience I had left. "Do us both a favor," I replied, my tone calmer than I felt. "Go stay with your parents until this is over. You're the one who wants out, not me." She sneered. "Oh, I'll be back in 30 minutes, she shot back. "You better not be here when I return, or I'll call the police. I'll say you threatened me, maybe even hit me. You know how it works. They'll keep you for 48 hours, and by the time you're back, I'll have changed the locks." A cold, calculated anger settled within me. She truly believed she could manipulate me so effortlessly. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice deceptively calm. "If you think you can scare me, you're wrong. I'm not going anywhere." She rolled her eyes and turned back to the mirror, focusing on her lipstick as if I wasn't even there. I left the room, my mind racing with thoughts. She believed she had the upper hand, but she underestimated me. In the garage, I spotted the aluminum baseball bat leaning against the wall, the same one I used during those summer games with friends. I picked it up, feeling its reassuring weight. My gaze shifted to her car parked outside. I could almost picture her driving off with that triumphant look on her face, leaving me behind. Not tonight. I put the bat down and went back to the garage. I removed her car's battery and placed it on my workbench. Her phone was next, tucked away in her purse. One decisive hit with a hammer, and the device split into 3 pieces. I calmly put the broken phone back into her bag, minus the battery. Tonight, she wasn't calling anyone. Then, I noticed a small packet of condoms in her purse. A fleeting thought crossed my mind to pierce them with a pin, but I quickly dismissed it. That would only backfire. She'd probably accuse me of sabotage, and that was a hassle I didn't need. By the time she appeared in the kitchen, she was fully dressed, black dress, high heels, and that garish red lipstick. She looked at me with a mixture of irritation and smug satisfaction, like she had already won. Out, she demanded, pointing at the door as if I were an intruder. I remained where I was, calmly pouring myself a cup of coffee and leaning against the counter. I took a slow, deliberate sip. "Good luck with your night," I said casually. Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering in them. "What did you do?" she snapped, her voice growing sharper. I took another sip, offering her a faint smile. "Why don't you check your car?" I suggested. Her heels clacked loudly as she stomped toward the front door. A few moments later, I heard the sound of her angry, frustrated shouting. She came back in, face flushed with fury. "What did you do to my car?" she yelled. I shrugged, keeping my tone light. "It's parked on the street. Anything could have happened." "You bastard," she hissed. "I'll just call him to pick me up." I nodded toward her purse. "Go ahead. You'll need your phone for that." She froze, then yanked her phone from the bag. When it wouldn't power on, her frustration turned to rage. "You broke my phone?" I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Maybe you should have kept a closer eye on it." Her face contorted with fury, and without another word, she swapped her heels for sneakers and stormed out. I watched from the window as she knocked on neighbor after neighbor's door, growing more desperate with each unanswered call for help. Her anger was palpable by the time she reached the end of the block. I remained calm, sipping my coffee, knowing it was only a matter of time before she found someone willing to lend a hand or resorted to calling the police. Either way, I was prepared. She thought she held all the power, but tonight would prove her wrong. As I listened, I could hear the distinct sound of her heels pounding on the floor above me, followed by sudden silence. Curiosity piqued, I glanced outside just in time to see her heading toward the garage. She wasn't giving up that easily. I knew Mia too well, impulsive yet predictable. She must have assumed I had left my Suburban, the Beast, in the garage. The same vehicle she used to jokingly refer to as a tank. What she didn't know was that I had already disconnected the garage door opener, anticipating this exact move. I watched as she climbed into the driver's seat. The Beast roared to life, its powerful engine vibrating through the floor. I almost stepped in to stop her, but decided to let her figure it out on her own. She hit the garage door button, nothing. After a few more failed attempts, she did the most typical Mia thing imaginable. She floored the gas. The massive engine surged forward, and with a deafening metallic screech, the Beast plowed into the garage door, tearing it apart with sheer force. The crumpled metal and splintered wood scraped and clattered as the vehicle forced its way out, dragging remnants of the door behind it. But that wasn't the worst part. A police cruiser was stationed in the worst possible spot, right behind the garage. The 2 officers inside had arrived in response to Mia's earlier threats to call the cops. The Beast plowed into the front of the cruiser with such force that the vehicle jolted backward several feet, its hood crumpling like an accordion. One officer had just started stepping out when the impact hit. The door flung back violently, knocking him off balance and sending him sprawling onto the pavement. His partner, a red-headed woman I recognized from high school, reacted instantly. Before Mia could even process what had happened, the officer had yanked her out of the driver's seat by the hair. Get on the ground, the redhead commanded, her voice cutting through the night. Mia shrieked something unintelligible, thrashing wildly as she was wrestled to the pavement. She didn't put up much of a fight, more sobbing and cursing than actual resistance. Meanwhile, I hurried to the officer who had been knocked down. Blood streamed from his obviously broken nose, but he was conscious. "Stay still," I told him, carefully cradling his head to keep his neck stable. "Help is on the way." The next 20 minutes unraveled in a chaotic blur. Curious neighbors peeked from windows, some even stepping outside to gawk. Flashing lights painted the street as ambulances arrived, followed by additional police cruisers. I answered a barrage of questions while keeping an eye on Mia, now handcuffed in the back of a squad car, wailing like a child caught stealing. By the time things settled, Mia was on her way to the hospital, her pride bruised, her neck stiff from the airbag, and a fresh list of criminal charges hanging over her. Reckless endangerment, property damage, and assaulting an officer with a vehicle, to name a few. As for me, I stood in the driveway, watching as the wrecked beast was hauled away. I should have been furious. But instead, I felt relief. This wasn't just about a wrecked car or a trash garage. It was proof, undeniable proof, that Mia was her own worst enemy. For all her threats, manipulation, and arrogance, she had finally crashed literally and figuratively. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. She folded her arms, glaring at me as if I had personally betrayed her, an ironic expression, given the circumstances. "You're leaving me with nothing," she finally snapped. "Not entirely," my lawyer countered smoothly. "We're willing to let you keep one of the bedroom sets. You know, for nostalgia." I could practically hear her teeth grinding. Without another word, she stormed out, leaving her lawyer to handle the rest. In the end, she walked away with her car, a fraction of the money she had withdrawn, and little else. Her attorney, realizing she was in a losing battle, had convinced her to settle before things spiraled further. The judge had no sympathy. He even commended me for taking steps to protect my assets, his polite way of saying I had outmaneuvered Mia at every turn. The moment the gavel came down, I was free. Meanwhile, she was left to deal with the legal disaster of her own making. For me, this had never been about revenge, it was about survival. Mia had spent years using manipulation, intimidation, and deceit to get her way, assuming I would cave. But she underestimated me. She thought I'd roll over and let her win. Instead, I played the long game. And when it was over, I walked away with my dignity intact. When the dust settled and the ink dried on the divorce papers, I finally had a chance to breathe. The feeling was strange, like stepping into someone else's life. For so long, my world had revolved around Mia, our marriage, and the constant tension that came with it. Now, she was gone. The house was quiet. But it wasn't an empty, lonely kind of silence, it was peaceful. For the first time in years, I could focus on myself, on what I wanted, without constantly bracing for the next fight. The first few months were about rebuilding. I worked on the house, reconnected with old friends, and rediscovered hobbies I had let slip away. It wasn't about distraction, it was about reclaiming myself. One of the first things I did was return to the shooting range, something I had always enjoyed but had neglected during my marriage.